Oh, and we're being recorded, so you hopefully heard that. So I say, well, I'm a member of the Chamber Legislation Committee, and so we try to help identify legislation opportunities that are relevant and help convey the opportunity to members. We also are actively promoting opportunities to government to change legislation that can help the Isle of Man. This is one such opportunity. So I've been talking to the Department for Enterprise for the last 3 years about changing the Electronic Transactions Act, which might not sound like the sexiest piece of legislation, but it's a really important enabling piece of legislation to enable you and I as citizens, businesses, and consumers to do stuff electronically. And that's a critical element of any modern economy. So really there's a chance to seize an opportunity here by responding to this consultation that the DFE has issued. So if I just move my slides on. Quick introduction. In the Isle of Man, the Electronic Transactions Act was introduced in the year 2000. At that time, people were talking about, oh, people may want to do things online. They may want to buy products and services online. Why don't we give them the access? But it was very much a twinkle in the eye rather than a commonplace thing that it is today. And of course, at that time, we didn't know then what we know now. So the legislation did not have a crystal ball. And looking back, some of it is complex and isn't easy to understand. It has not changed since 2000. Other jurisdictions have put in place newer, better legislation that can be great reference points to us. Furthermore, some transactions were actively excluded from the Act, as at that time they were considered too risky, and other transactions which are critical, it made no reference to, and so left us in ambiguity as to whether they were or were not legal electronically. So, in short, now is a really good time to update our legislation. And so the department deliberately did the consultation now, so that when the new minister and his team are in place, the new council of ministers in place, they can go back to the politicians and say, look, we've done the consultation. We know there's a case for change. Could we now approve this? And that's often a challenge for the new incoming administration to have stuff that's ready to go quite quickly. So this could be a genuine quick win for the new government. Fingers crossed. So what is electronic transactions? Why does it matter to us? Well, I'll talk a little bit now about why we should care. So electronic signatures are a critical part of this. So where we use electronic means to sign stuff. So instead of using the old way of working of paper and pen, which lasted from Victorian times on, now we're replacing it largely with something different, better in many ways. Electronic signatures. And courtesy of COVID, of course, it grew dramatically in the last year. So in 2020 alone, use grew by at least 50%. I've seen estimates of higher, but let's go with the conservative end. And most independent analysts are forecasting it will grow tenfold by 2030. And indeed, by 2030, many analysts are forecasting that ink signatures will be very unusual. I mean, Money Marketing is a publication aimed at the UK financial services market. They said in June that during April, May, e-signature use had jumped tenfold. And there's a link there to those of you who are interested in learning more. So that shows you that this is now something that's in everybody's everyday life at a scale that we couldn't have anticipated back in 2000 and growing fast. So we need absolute legal certainty about the status of those e-signatures to protect us as individuals and to protect us as businesses when we're doing contracts. Linked to that is electronic identification. So in other words, how do you know that the person is who they say they are? And when you were doing a physical meeting with the two of you sat in the room, both physically signing a piece of paper, you could argue that was the ultimate know your customer, because it was somebody you knew and you could physically watch them signing the contract and they could watch you. But increasingly that paradigm is dead. We're working with people all over the world, often winning new business with clients we haven't physically met and may never meet. And there's also been a sharp rise since COVID in digital fraud. So in that environment, we need to be able to conduct transactions with some certainty. And electronic identification can help you combat that by ensuring the person is who they say they are. So there's some very clever software that can check your driver's license, your passport, your face, and gather information and check it against databases and say, yes, that passport is valid, that person is who they say they are. And EID use is expected to grow dramatically and indeed become commonplace, particularly in regulated sectors. We've seen e-gaming, I've noticed in the last month or two, more talk about electronic identification in e-gaming than I've ever seen before. And financial services, a little bit behind that, but equally very interested in these technologies. Why is electronic identification becoming so important? Well, yes, there's the fraud. Yes, there's that distance. There's also increasing consumer demand for services now. They don't want delays, which require checks on them. They want access to products and services now. They want it on their mobile phone. And there's a greater demand for security and trust, both by consumers and by businesses. An accelerating shift towards smart cities. You think, what on earth is that? That's when, as you move about your environment, you can access public and private services on your smartphone because it knows who you are, it knows where you are, and you're accessing services, but with that electronic identification built in. And because of the power of that, there's more and more calls for public supervision of digital identity systems, and that links us to there's a growing use of national identity cards and electronic ID initiatives. So the EU right now is working on a digital identity for all EU citizens, and they will come up with a legal and technical standard in the next year or so, which will give clear guidance for software firms and lawyers and others as to the digital identity, which means that solutions will become available commercially that people inside the EU can use. Then potentially we could piggyback off that by recognizing those systems. So why should we care? Really, why are e-signatures and EID relevant? Well, there's a number of angles. One is just looking at it selfishly, internally, for us as businesses. Paper-based processes are very inefficient. They're slow, they're costly to operate, they're error-prone. It results in endless rekeying of data, which inevitably generates errors. It's costly and slow to oversee it and regulate it. Regulated financial services businesses in particular complain about the high costs of regulatory compliance because of the amount of manual checking of paper documents and manual audit trails around that are necessary. From a client's point of view, they hate all of the paperwork. Young people in particular do not want to fill in paper forms. They want services now, not tomorrow, not in an hour, and they want it on that. And if it's not on your smartphone, it doesn't exist, and they will go to somebody else who can give it on their smartphone. So there's all sorts of very good reasons why these technologies are vital to us. Briefly, what is an electronic signature? Some people talk about electronic signatures, some about digital signatures. Both are legally binding. There is a technical difference between the two. For those of you who care, it's on the screen. I'm going to use the term e-signature for the purposes of this webinar. So how does this affect us here in the Isle of Man? So why should we care about the Electronic Transactions Act being 21 years old? Well, there's a couple of reasons. For a start, not all government services permit e-signatures. And so that requires us as citizens to print paper forms, complete them in ink, post them in or take them in. Then government staff need to rekey that data that we've written out, causing inevitably errors, delays, and inefficiencies. And then eventually we may or may not get the service that we want. While we're wasting taxpayers' money on paperwork and paper processing that's adding no value. So if we can eliminate that, that's good for us as citizens and businesses, as well as taxpayers. In some cases, public and private bodies are currently accepting facsimiles of ink signatures, which are not legally enforceable in many cases. And that means you could find yourself with a contract that if somebody challenges it, it's not worth the paper it's written on, or rather it's not worth the digital bits and bytes that it's made of. So I know due to COVID, people were using a scan of their signature and copying and pasting that into documents, not legally valid in most use cases, where people were saying, "Oh well, I'll send in the document now, and I'll send you the signed copy later." But then the signed ink copy never reached the intended recipient or regulator. So that all of that is carrying grave risks that we just don't need. If we adopt good proven technologies for e-signatures and EID, we can just eliminate those risks. Also, while this stuff's been around for 20 years, it's still surprising how many people are not sure of the legality of e-signatures, particularly in the Isle of Man. And that's partially because we've had few test cases, and so in many areas, it is grey. So as I got up there, can we accept the signing of deeds electronically? Don't know. Can we have documents that require witnesses signed electronically? Don't know. And that uncertainty, that ambiguity, that creates risk that we just don't need. And so what many businesses have said, well, we're just not going to accept e-signatures. So the banks and the life insurance companies on the island are two good examples of that. So I've talked to many local businesses who are saying, I want to use e-signatures. I know it's a proven technology. I know it's used by my competitors overseas, but I'm not allowed to use it here because the banks won't accept it and the life insurance companies won't accept it. And so that's forcing them to use the old-fashioned paper and ink route. So there's a lot of good reasons why we ought to modernize our laws. And until Manx law and government policy is clear on these matters, it's very difficult for us to move forward. And it's also difficult for our regulators to support these technologies. If the law and government policy isn't clear and our regulators are led by our laws and our government, well, then how can we expect the regulator to say, yes, it's okay to use them? So the impact for government, you may have seen this screenshot before. This is government's online services. This is what you can do online. So cattle passports, fishing licenses, etc. And from government's perspective, many departments would love to be able to accept electronic signatures more commonly. But they are saying to me, and when I talk to them, they're not clear for many of their use cases. Is it legal? They're not clear. Is it government policy? And they're not clear, is there an approved IT system they can use? So for example, there is no internationally recognized e-signature system currently in use in Isle of Man government. There isn't any. Instead, what they're doing is they've created their own internal systems where in effect, when you tick a box at the end of filling in a form, and by doing so, in effect, you've signed it. But that's giving you no tangible independent proof that what you've submitted is what they subsequently use. So for example, you fill in your online tax form, at the end of it you say, yes, I have filled this honestly, and when you click yes and submit, legally that is your e-signature and binding, and you're trusting that none of the information that you've sent in on that form is subsequently changed, but you've no proof. Whereas with an e-signature system, you would both get a sealed, digitally sealed document with all that information in that you can refer to afterwards, so you know that the information hasn't been changed or tampered with afterwards. So there's all sorts of limitations on government departments. And as a result, many feel unable to act. And until they get a green light on all three of those, they've got to know it's legal for what they're doing. They've got to know they're getting clear political direction to use electronic transactions. And they've got to have a suitable IT system for e-signatures that they know it works inside government. Until they get three green lights on that, they're going nowhere. So we as citizens aren't getting the benefits of electronic transactions that are much more widespread in many other jurisdictions. For regulated businesses, in particular, not only does it need to be legal, but the regulator needs to say, yes, you can do it. So if we look at, say, financial services or e-gaming, the regulator will need to know, is it legal? Is it government policy? And also, is it in line with international standards that are So many of you will have heard of FATFA, the Financial Action Task Force, which is the global money laundering and terrorist financing watchdog. So it gives guidance to regulators worldwide. Last April, they said FATFA encourages the fullest use of responsible digital customer onboarding and delivery of digital financial services in light of social distancing measures. So it's saying these measures, e-signatures, EID, are far superior to the traditional ways of working, and we should now see the fullest possible use. And so FATFA is giving you the biggest, greenest light you can get. But still, our regulators can't act if they don't also have a green light on the, is it legal, and a green light on a, is it government policy? So as a result, other jurisdictions are adopting these technologies, and we're at risk of being at a competitive disadvantage. So people say, are e-signatures legal and accepted by regulators? They are. So the IoM FSA does, in certain circumstances, accept e-signatures, as does competitors like Jersey and Guernsey, and as does major international jurisdictions like the EU and the UK. And here's some links. Well, this is for those of you who want to refer back. And I work at MBS. We provide technology solutions, including DocuSign electronic signatures and some electronic identification solutions. And so we've got clients who are regulated by the IoM FSA and GSC, plus regulated in Jersey, Guernsey, and many other jurisdictions. And they've happily used electronic signatures for many years. So in certain circumstances, they're doable. But as I say, many people are saying to us, they just don't feel that the law is clear enough, that they feel safe enough to use them. So if we look at the UK and EU, what have they done? Well, the UK has made some really positive statements and steps in years. And so the UK Lord Chancellor confirmed last March, so March 2020, that e-signatures are legal in most cases, even when there was a requirement for a signature in the legislation that predates the digital age. In other words, they say that the digital signatures now supersede outdated legislation, which said in the past, you need an ink signature, because when it was written, that legislation, only ink signatures existed. So that sent a very powerful message to businesses. Yes, it's safe to use these technologies. And that followed a very extensive review by the UK Law Commission, which strongly supported the use of e-signatures. The EU went further. The EU had a very extensive consultation over a number of years about how can we come up with e-signatures and e-identification standards that work legally and work technically, so people know there's a strong, secure solution they can use with certainty. And they came up with something called EIDAS, Electronic Identification and Trust Services. Just trips off the tongue, doesn't it? So it sounds dreadfully dull, but it means that businesses, citizens, and individuals can buy and sell stuff we're using electronic signatures and electronic identification with much more confidence than we can, because they've got a clear legal and technical standard and software products that meet those standards, that they therefore can use safely and with confidence. And so EIDAS has become a global benchmark, and other countries have implemented the EIDAS approach or variants on it. In short, there are three standards of signature and EID within EIDAS. You can have a standard signature, an advanced, or a qualified. And as this little blue-orange bit at the bottom is trying to show you, for the signer, it'll have a different experience and how quickly it can be done. And from the other end of the signing experience, how much assurance and how much risk mitigation have we done? So basically, for a standard e-signature, you're sending them a document with either on an email or with an email link, and they use their email address as the primary identifier, and they sign the documents potentially with two-factor authentication, so with like an SMS message with a unique code that they need to enter before they can see it. And at that point, we say, yes, they've complied with the EIDAS standard e-signature, and that's an legally binding signature. And that's sufficient for the vast majority of use cases, and that's what's used in the vast majority of cases in the UK. If you want to go a bit further and say, no, I really do want an ID check on this person before they've signed it, you can have an advanced e-signature where they can hold up their passport on their phone, and a digital process will then say, yep, we've done a whole load of checks on that passport or that driving license. Yep, that looks like a valid one to us. And therefore, we meet the advanced e-signature standard. So you've got more certainty the person is who they say they are, and more legal protection. And then at the top, there's what's called qualified e-signatures. And this is where there's been multiple face-to-face checks done. So it was originally envisaged for physical face-to-face, but now the EU has accepted digital face-to-face. So now you can do, say, a video ID process. ID now has got a patented process, for example. They're one of the leading providers in this space, where you would do a video ID, or they would do a video ID with your client. They would come back and say, yeah, Chris Corlett, that's who he says he is. We've done in-depth checks on his passport. We've done facial recognition using AI on him. We've confirmed that it's not an avatar. We've confirmed he's not under duress. We've asked him all sorts of questions, and we've fired through to you as the company a certificate saying this transaction now meets the qualified e-signature standard in EU law. And what that means is in any court and for any regulator inside the EU, they must accept the e-signature with the same or greater weight as any ink signature. And the burden of proof moves from you, the business, to the signer. So if the signer says a year later, oh, I never signed that, they would need to prove in a court that they hadn't. You wouldn't need to prove that they had. And so for people who are doing high value transactions where you want to be very sure, so maybe business transactions for large sums, or setting up a trust if you're a CSP for a high value individual who's setting up a trust for millions of dollars worth of assets, qualified e-signatures is very appealing. I've given you a very quick skim through that, so apologies, and I can answer questions later if that helps, but I want to give you a quick flavor for this. So that brings us on to the consultation then. So they've asked us 9 questions, only 9, but you're welcome to add in comments on top. So it's important that businesses do go back to government and say, yes, we would like modernisation of this legislation, because we do want to be able to transact electronically with more confidence and more legal certainty, so we don't feel our business is at risk. So the first is, do you agree with the proposal that the Electronic Transactions Act should be amended so that public bodies may use electronic transactions by consent in the same way as private individuals or businesses may? And please explain your view. And I said, yes, public and private bodies should have exactly the same process, because we want to make it easy for individuals to understand and use electronic transactions. If we want ordinary citizens and consumers to use this stuff and feel comfortable with it, we can't say, well, if you're talking to a government body, it's got this particular process. If you're talking about the private sector, it's got that. It's got to be simple and easy for people to understand. And they've got to feel they've got the same protection and the same rights, whether they're ticking one box or another. Question 2, do you agree with the proposal that the ETA should be amended in order to enable digital signatures to be admitted in legal proceedings, for example, in court documents and witness statements? And yes, absolutely. I mean, this is now standard practice in many courts around the world. I mean, the EU, so the European Court of Human Rights, when it was taking testimony about human rights abuses in the former Yugoslavia, the vast bulk of testimony was not coming in with ink signatures, it was coming in with e-signatures, because it made it so much easier to capture and transmit evidence. And that is legally recognized, legally binding. And so there's no reason why the Isle of Man shouldn't take advantage of this, why our courts can't be more efficient and effective using e-signatures. Do you agree with the proposal that it should be possible to electronically execute transfers or mortgages of, or a share of, in a registered ship or vessel? So the ship registry, which of course is part of DFE, they flagged that they want absolute certainty for their particular use cases. So the department has added this in. I mean, my view would be, I'm not a legal expert on shipping mortgages, but the law is the law, and it should consistently apply to all transactions, and whether it's a deed for a ship or a house or whatever it may be, they should have exactly the same ability to use electronic transactions. And my understanding is the UK and other jurisdictions already accept such documents, so why would we not? And it is the direction of travel. You go forward 3, 4, 5, at most 10 years. As I say, ink signatures will largely disappear and replaced by electronic signatures. We should anticipate that world. We should prepare for that world now and make it as easy for people to operate in that world as we can. What difficulties might arise from making electronically executed ship mortgages or legally valid? I'm not aware of any, but I'm not a shipping expert, so I'll leave that for the Shipping Association and other shipping companies to express a view. Do you think the regulations under the Electronic Transactions Act should be amended to allow an electronically transacted general power of attorney? And powers of attorney, this is where an individual may be of diminished responsibility, permanently or temporarily, and others are given powers to act on their behalf. Again, my view would be, why would we do anything, carve out any exception, if when we know that electronic signatures and electronic identification is better than ink and is a thoroughly robust process? Why would we carve out any use case and say, oh, no, that's different and special, that's got to be ink? There's got to be a very, very, very compelling reason why we would say, no, that's got to be ink. I'm not aware of any why there should be, but I'm not an expert in this particular field. So my principle remains the same. Yes, they should. But there may be specialist lawyers who've worked in this field who may come up with some reason that I'm not aware of. So again, this is an open consultation for us all to bring our relevant skills to bear. Do you think that there is a benefit in recognising EIDAS standards in the Isle of Man? And absolutely, yes. So EIDAS, which just for clarity's sake, when the UK left the EU, when it Brexited, it copied EIDAS to the letter, lock, stock and barrel. So EIDAS is not just EU law, but it's UK law. And it's widely recognised internationally, and there are other jurisdictions who've used it as a guidance. And so it's been developed by people with far greater legal and technical expertise in these matters than I do, and it's recognised internationally. And there are software products as a result that meet the standards and therefore are readily commercially available to us as businesses that we can buy and use with confidence. And so that's why we should adopt it. Why would we want to reinvent the wheel? So we then end up in a situation that isn't recognized internationally, that doesn't fit with what the globally recognized standards are, where there aren't software products commercially available that we can use. Why would we reinvent that wheel? We simply don't have the scale, the knowledge, the expertise to do that. So the logical thing to do is, just recognize the EIDAS. It's quick, it's simple, it costs us next to nothing, and it makes life much, much easier for us as businesses and citizens, because then we can have some legal certainty and use products that work and work all over the world. So would a general provision in the ETA to enable remote witnessing be helpful? Now, this is an interesting point. So the UK had some discussions on this, while they're saying for deeds where a signatory and the witness both need to sign a document, the UK has said that they can both sign it using an electronic signature, but the witness must be physically present with the signer. Meanwhile, some other jurisdictions, for example, in Australia, they've said, well, actually, if there's a video link so that the e-witness can see the person signing it, and that they know that the technology system they're using is robust and the thing they're signing is the same thing as the person's witnessing, why not? And so it has been used in certain jurisdictions. So I've put, it's definitely worthy of consideration, and it's highly likely that's the direction of travel. Now, it may be that in the short term, we simply follow the UK approach and say, yes, you can definitely use electronic signatures for witnesses, as long as they're physically present. But we don't need to go a step further to having, remote witnessing. Or it may be we say, actually, no, there is enough legal and technical precedent out there. We're satisfied we can use what's been done in Australia and elsewhere. Again, I don't have all the answers on this. I'm not an expert in all of this. We as Chamber are keen to engage, make people aware of the potential opportunities and benefits, and get this done. And we're very, very conscious that we here on the Isle of Man, we conduct an awful lot of international business with an awful lot of global clients, high net worth clients, and where there will be instances where the person we want to sign a document and the person they want to witness it are physically not in the same country. Do we compel them to be, or do we use modern technology and create something that's easy for them to use and giving us the security that we need legally by recognizing it? So I think there's a legitimate debate to be had there. Do you have any views as to how a process for remote witnessing should work? As I say, it has been used in certain places like Australia using video. If it's worked elsewhere, there's no reason to see why it would work here, but it's worth us giving it a bit more thought. So are there any other measures or issues to do with electronic transactions, identification, signatures, or execution of documents that should be considered by the Isle of Man government? Well, my thoughts on that is that Isle of Man government should make it clear policy that it wants to make it easy and safe for individuals and businesses to access public and private services via digital means. This will help us achieve efficient, effective government, help our businesses win new businesses globally, and help our community attract the technology native individuals that we need for our economy to flourish. So the consultation closes on the 29th of this month. That doesn't give us a huge amount of time. So we're keen for individual members to respond. We're keen for business bodies representing particular sectors to respond. And of course, we're keen for Chamber to respond. So please do let us have your views as well. So at that point, after I've whizzed through that, I will throw it open for some questions.
Thank you very much, Chris. Absolutely spot on. This is brilliant, and it's been recorded, so I can share this with everyone that's attended. One lady had to go off to the dentist, so I'll share this. So she'd rather be listening to you than go to the dentist. So,
that's nice.
Does anybody have any questions? Doesn't look like it. If you could just pop any comments in the chat, you are welcome to, or raise your hand, and I will come to you.
Well, one, I think it is a big topic, and it surprises people when they hear that our legislation is so old and so vague, and so some people are using this technology, assuming that legal standards and norms that are proven in the UK and are being applied here, and so it does show this is an important topic. The signatures at the bottom of documents are fundamental to us. I mean, in business, it's the bedrock on which our businesses are built. If the contracts our customers are signing with us and that we sign with our suppliers are not legally valid, then what business do we have? So, and at the same time, we want to be able to conduct business quickly and easily. And so the world is moving digital. Everybody is moving towards digital services. And so this is a critical part of enabling that. So it may not be the most exciting topic. I find it very interesting. Not everybody may, but it really is important to all of us. So it's well worth us all spending a bit of time thinking.
Yeah, excellent. that just leaves me to say thank you very much, Chris, for taking some time to do this for us. And for those members that are on the call, you should have received an email from me yesterday, which has a link to the consultation. As Chris mentioned, the Chamber will be putting forward submissions on behalf of the Digital Committee and the Financial Professional Services Committee, but we also encourage members to put in submissions on an individual basis as well, because that then obviously gives it more strength. So thank you so much, and I'll see you all soon.